Hello, everybody. Mr. H here with you. Democracy in America. Our crazy country has made it out of the gates. We've gone down the tracks, trying to stay on that track. George Washington, our first president, had gave us a little bit of advice about, on his way out there with his farewell addresses to avoid factions, i.e., political parties, and entangling alliances. All right, so how we doing so far on that? Not too good. We've got two parties out there. Got the Federalist Party and the Anti-Federalist Party. Like comes those Democratic Republicans. They're not as well organized as political parties are today, but same sort of dysfunction and arguing and paralysis, and that's what he was trying to avoid. And we have plunged headfirst into this. Entangling alliances. Well, around 1800, what's going on in Europe? Exactly. We've got the wars of the French Revolution. Napoleon shows up. So France and Britain are fighting each other. And it's kind of hard to avoid getting caught in the middle because Britain's our number one trading partner and France is trading partner number two. So it's kind of hard to not get mixed up in that. But at least we're not involved in direct combat. So we get half credit on that. Second party was, of course, second president rather, was John Adams, who was a Federalist. He lost in 1800 to Thomas Jefferson. And what happened? Absolutely nothing. So that's good. But, Thomas Jefferson's got a problem when he came in. Remember millions for defense and not 1 cent for tribute? Yeah. Well, we're trying to diversify our trade with somebody other than France and Britain, right? So we're going down into the Mediterranean. We run into the Barbary pirates who are hijacking ships left and right. When we were a British colony, we were legally part of Great Britain, and they knew better than to mess with the Royal Navy. Well, now that they have the stars and stripes, they have no idea what that is, but they do know it's not a British flag, so off they go. They start attacking American ships. A lot of countries just bribed them, paid them, leave us alone. We don't really have much of a navy right now. We're still working on it, and not a lot we can do, so we end up bribing them. In 1795, we pay them $1 million, which is 16% of the federal budget. Remember, millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. Suddenly, the $250,000 X, Y, and Z was asking for doesn't sound like a whole lot, does it? Well, now we got a bit of a problem here because of 16% of budget. You could do a lot with 16% of budget, something other than sending it to these guys. Thomas Jefferson is president number three. He is an anti-federalist, a Democratic Republican, does not wish to expand the government, and he's the guy who wrote the Constitution in the first place. He fought for liberty and freedom, and he ended up owning slaves. He was a dedicated Democratic Republican and became the greatest Federalist anybody had ever seen. Now, this doesn't mean he's a hypocrite. Okay, maybe a little bit. But as far as the Federalist and Anti-Federalist drama goes, well, to be honest with you, sometimes things happen and situations change. This is nothing new. It happens all the time. Candidate Obama wanted to do a whole bunch of things, but President Obama ends up with a Congress that's made up of a lot of people from the other party. So he can't really do everything he wanted to do. Candidate Trump wants to do a lot of stuff, but President Trump ends up staring at a Congress full of people from the other party. So he can't really do everything he wants to do. See the problem? Plus, situations tend to arise sometimes that kind of change what you wanted to do in the first place. Let's talk about Jefferson here. He hates high taxes. Standing armies and corruption can destroy liberty, right? Everyone agrees that. But he needs to expand the military, the army, to get Native Americans under control out west. We need a navy to push back against France, Britain, and the Barbary pirates, all of which are becoming increasingly aggressive. Doesn't like standing armies, but we need one. Where do they? How do you pay for this? You got to raise taxes. Doesn't like high taxes. See what I mean? Things start changing when you come into office. Farmers are natural Democrats. Why? Because they own their own land and they don't work for anybody. That's what Jefferson is. He's got his own land. He doesn't owe anybody anything. But the country, for better or for worse, is beginning to urbanize. The Industrial Revolution is starting in the Connecticut River Valley, and that's just something that's going to happen. Whether you like it or not, change will occur. Sometimes it's good, sometimes bad, sometimes we don't really know. But we do agree that corruption's a bad thing. Yeah. All right, so we got to do something about corruption. Not a big problem yet, but keep an eye on it. Hey, the Supreme Court finally decides to make an appearance in the history books. It's been around since 1789. What you guys been up to? Well, in 1803, they finally make it into the pages there, and it's a court case of Marbury versus Madison in 1803. Details aren't really that important, but um, William Marbury had been promised a judgeship by Adams at the 11th hour just before his presidency expired, and the commissions were there and hadn't been delivered when Jefferson came into office. Jefferson told Madison, his Secretary of State, hey, don't deliver those things. That doesn't matter. Previous administration, right? Just don't email or anything. You literally had to deliver it. Well, William Marbury is very upset about it, so he takes Madison, Secretary of State, who's supposed to deliver these things to court, and he's suing to get his judgeship. Well, it's the first time the Supreme Court actually weighed in on something, and this is the first time they'd actually decided that they could engage in the doctrine of judicial review. Suddenly, Supreme Court can review every single congressional action. Congress has said they couldn't look at it. Supreme Court overrules, yes, we can. Oddly enough, they supported Madison and the whole thing. William Marbury had a great career as a banker, so he actually made more money doing that anyway. So Congress tried to stop the Supreme Court from reviewing this. Supreme Court says we're going to review it, and they ended up siding with Congress anyway. Now we got McCulloch versus Maryland in 1819. This is considerably after Jefferson, but it's very important. Now, this was with the National Bank. Jefferson would never be on board a national bank, but it came along in 1816 after he left, and immediately the states tried to tax it. Can a state tax the federal government? And before we get to that, can Congress even establish a bank in the first place? Turns out they can. Article 1, Section 8, right? All whatever you need to do basically to make the country operate well. So they interpreted that. Congress had passed it. There it is. And now, can a state tax a federal government? And the answer is no. The power to tax is the power to destroy. And we're deciding this federal over state thing fairly early on. And this is something that's going to be a problem. Actually, it's still a problem. Not as big as it used to be, but it's still a problem. And they've established the federal government is supreme over state government, but there are some state powers the federal government can't touch. More on that later. All righty. Now, Jefferson, Mr. Strict Constructionalist. If it's not in the Constitution, don't do it. That's why he said no to a bank and had to wait till after he was gone. Oh, there we go again with that. It's active day today. Now, here's something else we can do. Let's buy Louisiana. Let's make the country bigger. This is something no anti-federalists would ever do because take a good look at the Constitution. Where in there does it say anything about acquiring territory? And if you are a strict constitutionalist, like a good Democratic Republican like Jefferson, you don't do this. But he did it. Why did he do this? Because we've got farmers out here in the Indiana Territory, Mississippi Territory, Kentucky, Tennessee, who are going to ship their stuff down the Mississippi to New Orleans, sell their stuff, or continue shipping it here to the East Coast. Because it's much easier to move stuff by water than it is to go over land. Even if it's longer, it's still easier. Well, if they cut off New Orleans, nothing gets in or out. These guys go bust, they leave the territory, everything spins off into chaos. Now, Spain used to own this thing, and now in 1800, it belongs to France, the secret treaty that wasn't a secret. In 1800, France owns this thing, and Pinckney's treaty doesn't mean anything anymore. So, we got to do something about New Orleans. Jefferson's like, well, you know what? Let's buy New Orleans. There's 15 million bucks. He hands the briefcase off to some people and say, buy New Orleans. Buy New Orleans and see if you can get some kind of land to connect it to the rest of the country. Now, this is something a Democratic Republican / anti-federalist would never do. However, when it comes to national security, you got to do what you got to do. And remember something. You're going to hear this over and over from me. Your country comes ahead of your party. If you are a 21st century Democrat and a Republican has a good idea that helps the country, you vote for that. If you are a 21st century Republican and a Democrat has a good idea that helps the country, you vote for that because your country comes ahead of your party. And if your party gives you a hard time over it, you could always switch parties, right? Country ahead of party, avoiding factions, remember? So, Napoleon looks at the 15 million, considers selling off New Orleans. He says, I got a better idea. How about I give you the whole thing? $15 million for the whole thing. So instead of sending a message back to Jefferson, they just take the whole thing. Once Jefferson realized what they was like, well, you did what? So now the size of the country has doubled. How about that? See, because Napoleon was fighting the British, Napoleonic Wars, he needed some money. So 15 million showed up, and there's nothing he can do with this, so he sold it off. So here we go. Here we go. We got it. Let's open the box. Take a look what's in there. So Lewis and Clark going to go do some exploration. They follow the Missouri River. They're going to cross the Rockies, then the Oregon country, all the way to the Pacific. Federalists are outraged. Why are they upset? You just did everything a Federalist would want. He's building up the Army. He's building up the Navy. He just made the country bigger, right? Loose interpretation of the Constitution. And Federalists are mad at him? What for? Yeah, because politics does strange things to people, man. You do everything the other party wants, they get mad at you. It's one thing if the anti-Federalist / Democratic Republicans get mad at him, but the Federalists are mad? Oh, come on, man. I did everything you wanted. What are you still upset with me for? See, politics, weird things to people. So Lewis and Clark, to go out there and check out the Louisiana territory, the northern half of it. They went over the Rockies all the way to the Pacific. They make it over there into the Oregon country, which is claimed by Great Britain because they're up there in Canada, Spain, working their way up from Mexico, and Russia coming down from Alaska. Now we get to be part of the mix. Sacagawea, Shoshone guide, who is 19 years old and just had a baby, is going to take them all the way across to the Pacific. Woman's work is never done, right? My wife around? Good. All righty, moving on. So Lewis and Clark, they're checking out the northern half of it. They're also encountering various tribes here: the Sioux, the Shoshone, Nez Perce, Blackfeet. Going to make their way down the Columbia River, follow it all the way down to the Pacific. And what about this part down here? In fact, where's the boundary down here? When Spain owned the whole thing, it didn't really matter. Now that we've bought this thing, we're not totally sure where this border is. So they're going to send Zebulon Pike to find out. So Zebulon's taken out the southwest here, climbs around in some mountains, Pike's Peak, the highest one. Not really sure where the border is, but when you start going here, you're definitely in Spanish territory now. Well, anyway, they arrested him for trespassing, eventually let him go. But now we know where that border is, sort of, how far we can go before we get arrested. He also went looking for the source of the Mississippi River, found that too. So Zebulon Pike, very busy guy. Now, political arguments can get really heated, and you've probably seen it at some point, but in the early 19th century, it can get really nuts. People even dueling, and dueling is fading out. It's illegal in New York, but it's still okay in New Jersey. And dueling back then is a long, complicated process here. I mean, you got to talk. You're not even talking to these two guys. These two guys are upset with each other. Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton. And it's this long, drawn-out affair where everyone dresses up and they speak to each other through a guy they call a second, okay? And then they meet somewhere to 10 steps, turn around and shoot at each other. Quite often, people just shot in the air and everyone was happy about it, right? So Alexander Hamilton, who is a Federalist, shoots up in the air, and Burr, who is the anti-Federalist, shoots him. Well, he's up for murder now and spends the rest of his life as a fugitive. Lesson here, please don't get upset in a duel, okay? People argue now with Twitter and Instagram and stuff. Let's stick with that. And if you do have to meet face to face, you could always arm wrestle or race 50 yards or something like that. Now, we've got problems with the British. Oh, the British again. What's with these guys? Well, they've got a really big war going on with the French there, Napoleonic Wars. And, well, they're hijacking American ships. It's called impressment. We're looking for people who have deserted from the British Navy. And believe me, being in the British Navy is not a lot of fun. Plus, people tend to die on these ships, too. So, got a British ship floating around out here, and, you had like 3 crewmen die on you. You dump them overboard, and there's an American merchant ship, so you basically hijack it. You have cannons, they don't. So you go over there and you take 3 people off the boat. Yeah, maybe one guy's an actual British deserter. Hear the accent, maybe you can tell he's faking it. The other 2 guys, they're from Boston, you grab them anyway. See, can't do that, it's illegal. And then the British have the temerity and the arrogance to declare broken voyages to be illegal. Oh, what's a broken voyage? Now, back when we were a colony, a broken voyage was that you can only sail from the colonies to Great Britain. You could go to the French West Indies with permission and had to pay a tariff, but most of the time it's just the colonies to Great Britain. If you went somewhere else, like Portugal or France without permission, then came to London, if they found out, it's declared a broken voyage, illegal, and bad things happen. Well, a news flash, Great Britain, it's 1806. It's not 1776 anymore. We're a free country. We go where we want. So if I want to take my boat from New York and go to Portugal and then go to London, I will bloody go to Portugal and then go to London, even if I don't sell anything, just to annoy you. Problem is, Great Britain regards us as illegal and they're going to punish you, even though they can't really do that. U.S. Navy doesn't really exist yet. We're still building this thing. To make things worse, the British are forcing U.S. ships to line up mere miles from the coast to be searched for contraband or stuff going to France. Now, if I'm in London, I got to do what they're going to do because it's their port, right? Inside British territorial waters, they can search your ship if they feel like it. They can make you do the hokey pokey. Oh, here comes the rain. Good thing we're indoors. Nonetheless, they'll make you do the hokey pokey if they want, and there's nothing you can do. Sometimes, if you're 13 or 14 miles out, they will, they'll search you anyway because you're coming in, so no big deal. Get it out of the way. But they're searching people 5 feet outside American waters, and a couple of times they came into American territorial waters, searching ships or even taking people off. Can't have that. Hey, Jefferson, step it up with building some American ships. We need the U.S. Navy out here. Well, one day the U.S. Navy goes out there and gets attacked by a British ship. The USS Chesapeake gets attacked by Her Majesty's ship Leopard in June of 1807. I know it says Constitution over here, but this is really a cool picture. So now they have opened fire on the U.S. Navy inside American territorial waters. A lot of people want to go to war. Can't say I blame them, but Jefferson is smart enough to know we're not quite ready yet. In 1808, we got a new president, James Madison. Battle of Tippecanoe. This is a little bit blurry, so let's go with this. All righty, Battle of Tippecanoe is out there in Indiana in 1811. Tecumseh's Indians, he had actually led a confederation of Indians to try to push the settlers out of what's going to be Indiana one day, is defeated in a big battle called Tippecanoe by William Henry Harrison. What makes everything so bad is that we start finding British weaponry, and they set up some forts in secret, and it's clearly in American territory. So Britain's really making people upset, okay? You're hijacking American ships, you shot at the U.S. Navy in American territorial waters, you're causing problems in the Northwest, we're finding British weapons out there. Yeah, do you think it's time to go toe-to-toe with the British? It's very hard to hold back. We're going to do this anyway. Jefferson tries to find a way to scare the British. He wants the British to see this. Unfortunately, they see this instead. We figure, well, since the British and French make a considerable amount of money with our trade, we're just going to pass the Embargo Act of 1807. No American trade with any foreign port. Does that hurt the British? Yes. Hurt the French? Yes. Who gets hurt the worst? We get hurt the worst because if I'm a merchant in Boston and my trade is with the British, suddenly I can't go there. In fact, I can't go anywhere. So a lot of people getting upset with Jefferson. Well, Jefferson's out in 1808 after term number 2. In comes James Madison, and he introduces the Non-Intercourse Act. Okay, snicker, snicker, snicker. Get your mind out of the gutter. Okay, this one is trade with anyone other than France or Britain. So we're going to trade with the whole world except you, France, and we're not going to trade with Great Britain either. A little bit better not to trade in Portugal or Spain, but still France and Britain were the two number one, number two trade partners, man. I don't know, but I don't know about this. Not working out too great. Here comes Macon's Bill number 2. All right, what was number 1? Looked the same. I don't know what the deal was, but there it is, number 2. We're going to halt trade with the nation who, I'm going to write, continues raiding the United States, right? If you stop raiding the U.S. ships, then we will trade with you and refuse to trade with the other guy. So if the British stop raiding us, we won't trade with France. If France stops raiding us, we won't trade with Great Britain. And France very quickly announces they will not raid any American ships, since Britain was raiding most of them anyway, because France didn't have that big of a navy. But, bad timing. So we're going to stop trading with the British. Unfortunately, a lot of people start trading in Canada. It goes to the British anyway. Well, Britain had already announced that anything going to Europe was going to be stopped for inspection. Not only are we going to inspect it, you got to come to London to be inspected. So if I'm going to Portugal, some British ship is going to jump me out in the middle of the Atlantic, bring me into London, do the search there, and then say you can go. No, this isn't going to fly, dude. I'm an American. I will sail my ship wherever I feel like sailing it. France had the same policy, but it's a smaller navy, and they weren't quite as big an offender. So, Britain gets all the posts, plus we got a recent history with these guys. And now we are starting to get very, very angry with these people. And the War of 1812 is going to explode. We get mad one day, and we're going to war with the British. Now, the American side is, you're causing problems in the Northwest with Indians and secret forts and weapons. You're raiding American ships as close as there, okay? So we're kind of upset. The British view is that we're in a fight to the death here with the French. You're still trading with the French, and now you jump on our back here in a battle in the War of 1812. All right, who's right, who's wrong, depends where you live, I guess. But I can tell you one thing. The War of 1812 is the perfect example of how not to fight a war, because neither side was actually ready. We're not going to go through every battle. I'm just going to hit you with some of the high points and illustrate why nobody was ready. Now, Britain's fighting the French, the big games over there in Europe. Over here, we got the scrubs. All right? So we got the second line troops and a general named Edwin Brock, who is Canada's national hero, despite the fact that he hated Canada and Canadians. Somebody's gotten a wreck right here. Yep. Hopefully your day's better than theirs. Nonetheless, we decide to invade Canada. They try to attack from Detroit. There's a big army led here by Brock. We run back. We surrender Detroit without a shot being fired. Not off to a good start here. We try to take Montreal, and our militia stops right at the border and says, no one said we have to fight outside the United States. Great. And then we've got another battle over here near Niagara. We cross. There's a big battle, and it kind of ended in a draw. So 1812, don't like the British are very upset with us at all. All right, they're not too worried about us. 1813 rides around, and this time we try to take Canada. They left Detroit. We attack Detroit. Big battle, Battle of the Thames over here, and we get Brock killed. Yay, we got something done right. These guys are marching towards Montreal again, but there's a big British fort. So admirals decide to build fortress right here. And then, of course, we got another battle at Queenston Heights that ends up in a draw, but the British get mauled pretty bad. So then Napoleon loses in 1814, and the British turn around and they look right at us. Whoops, some unfinished business. Now it's time for them to launch a three-pronged attack. First, they're going to come down out of Montreal, that big army's been sitting there for 2 years, and take New York. But to get there, they have to sail their ships down Lake Champlain. So we've got lake battles up here, and the British lose, so they're not going anywhere. Got another force that comes sailing around here. Shells Baltimore, trying to get Fort McHenry, but they can't seem to get it, and we get a national anthem out of this. But they do land in D.C. and burn down the White House. James Madison was taking his role as defender of the Constitution very literally and had his dueling pistols out in the middle of Pennsylvania Avenue ready to fight the Redcoats. Somebody grabbed him and said, let's please get out of here, Mr. President. They got some militia together, got scattered. The British ate dinner at the White House and then burned it down. Then, of course, we negotiated the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the War of 1812 in December of 1814. Problem is, with communication being the way it is back then, we got one more battle to fight, the Battle of New Orleans. This was shot number 3 they were taking. Of course, because there's no Twitter, nobody knew about this. The British land in New Orleans, and they try to storm their way up the river, and they don't get there because General Andrew Jackson takes his militia, his regular soldiers, and fortifications, and blasts the British into next week. British General Edward Packingham, a veteran of Napoleonic Wars, catches one between the eyes. It's all over. The British decide to leave with 2,000 casualties in the field. American casualties, 8 killed, 13 wounded. Yeah, we won. Andrew Jackson's a national hero. He's going to ride this all the way to the presidency. Well, I'm going to take a little break and give you guys a break. We'll be back for Democracy in America Part 2 in just a bit.